A couple of officers in town thought they'd give me a warm welcome, tying me to a pole for everyone to see, treating me as if I was some nobody. Little did they know who they were dealing with, or how this was all about to blow up in their faces. Let's take it back to the beginning. So, here's the story. Name's Reggie, 50, and I've been around the block in law enforcement. I'd just moved to this small southern town in Georgia to take up the badge as the new police chief. It wasn't my first time in the role, but I could tell right away that this town was going to be different. There was something about the way people looked at me, and I didn't have to guess why. Around here, they didn't seem to take too kindly to fresh faces or a black man stepping into a position of authority. On my first day, before officially starting, I figured I'd get a feel for the town on my own. Wearing a worn-out cap and an old jacket to keep it low-key, I wandered over to a small cafe that looked like it had seen generations come and go. As soon as I walked in, every conversation in the place stopped. Heads turned, eyes fixed on me. I'd felt looks like these before, the kind that said, "You don't belong here." And in the corner, I noticed two cops watching me, snickering and whispering, their stares telling me everything I needed to know. To them, I was just another outsider, and worse, a black outsider. I ordered a coffee, stayed calm, and kept my eyes on them without letting on who I was. They kept watching, laughing, and sizing me up as if they had me figured out. I took my coffee to go, but just as I turned to leave, one of them, a tall guy with a smug look plastered across his face, called out, "Hey, old man, you lost or something? You sure don't look like you're from around here." I turned, met his eyes, and replied, "Just passing through." His grin widened as he looked me over and said, "Well, maybe keep passing. Strangers don't last long around here, especially not ones like you." There it was, direct, undisguised, and chillingly clear. They wanted me gone, and they didn't care how that came across. But I ignored it and walked out, feeling their stares burn into my back as I left. The next morning, I went for a jog outside of town, taking in the fresh air and clearing my head before officially stepping into my role. About halfway through, I noticed a patrol car rolling up beside me, the windows down. And of course, it was the same two from the cafe. The tall, wiry one, Ben, and his bulky partner, Rick, who looked like he could lift a truck. Ben leaned out the window, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Runner! You lost?" His partner chimed in. "Are you sure you're welcome around here?" I slowed my pace and replied, "Just going for a run." "Pretty sure that's still allowed, right?" Rick's grin was condescending, his eyes glinting with a smugness that made my stomach turn. Allowed? Maybe, but strangers don't exactly get the warmest welcome around here. Before I could respond, they both got out, striding over to me with that arrogant swagger that said they thought they owned the place. Then came the part that got to me. Without a word, they started patting down my pockets, a clear show of authority. Ben pulled out a random piece of plastic from my pocket, holding it up triumphantly as if he'd found some damning evidence. Well, look at this," he sneered, smirking at his partner like they'd uncovered a crime. It was pretty clear they were going to make this a show. They each grabbed one of my arms, dragging me right down Main Street. They didn't bother explaining or asking questions. They just hauled me along as if I was some animal. People started to gather, watching as they led me to a lamppost in the middle of the town square. They tied my hands around it, making sure everyone could see what they were doing. A crowd formed, some people whispering, others pulling out their phones to record the scene. A few of them looked shocked, but most just watched with a kind of detached interest, like they'd seen this before. Ben cleared his throat, making a grand announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves a big city troublemaker here." Rick followed up, cracking a joke. "Think he's got a few tricks up his sleeve, or maybe in his pockets." Their laughter was loud and harsh, and I stood there, hands tied, with their mocking voices echoing around me. It was more than just a prank. This was about showing the new guy his place, and it was clear that race played a big part in it. But this little show didn't stay a local secret for long. By the next morning, videos of me tied to that pole had exploded online, with people all over asking questions. Who was I? What had I done? And what kind of town was this? The reactions poured in, with some people calling out the cops for their actions, while others just watched in stunned silence. Soon enough, the local news got wind of it, and reporters began to show up, looking for their big story. It was chaos, with journalists shoving mics in front of bystanders, asking, "Did anyone see this man commit a crime?" Most just shrugged, some muttering that it was just a little fun. Meanwhile, Ben and Rick were still strutting around like they'd just won a medal, laughing and joking with each other. They didn't have a clue how fast this was spiraling out of their control. Watching them, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. They were setting the stage perfectly, and soon enough, it was going to be time for my big reveal. After what felt like the longest night ever, my phone rang early the next morning. The caller ID showed the main office. Word had travelled up the chain, and they weren't happy. I could feel the shift. What these two had thought was fun was now a full-blown scandal. I walked into the station that day in full uniform, feeling the weight of my badge. This was no ordinary day. This was my chance to set things straight. I made my way to the main hall, every step echoing in the tense silence. Just as expected, Ben and Rick strolled in, laughing over some inside joke. But when they spotted me, the laughter died. Their faces drained of colour, shock spreading like wildfire. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. Then I broke it, my voice calm but firm. "We've got a situation, gentlemen," I said, looking them dead in the eyes. "And you're both right in the middle of it." They stammered, trying to explain, but I held up a hand. "Save it, I've seen enough." I pulled out my phone and hit play, showing the video of them tying me up, complete with their mocking remarks. "In case anyone's confused, this is what went down," I announced to the room. These two thought they could have some fun at the expense of a stranger, without even checking who I was. Ben, still trying to hold on to some sense of control, muttered, "Chief, this is just how things work here. It's tradition, keeps people in line." I raised an eyebrow. A tradition of humiliating newcomers, of treating people differently because of who they are. He looked around for support, but the room had gone silent. It was clear he was out of excuses. The scandal grew like wildfire. Reporters were everywhere, camped outside the station, capturing every detail. The community was in uproar, with people protesting and demanding justice. Some townsfolk, who had once laughed off Ben and Rick's antics, were now stepping forward with stories of their own, speaking out about the years of mistreatment and intimidation they'd endured. I called a meeting, gathering every officer in the main hall. "From this day on," I said, "any behavior that disrespects this community will be met with immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances." This wasn't just about Ben and Rick. It was about turning a page for the whole department. I handed Ben and Rick their termination forms, watching as they took off their badges in silence. The room was dead quiet as they left, realizing just how badly they'd misjudged the situation. In the days that followed, the local prosecutor opened an investigation into Ben and Rick's past actions. It didn't take long for a mountain of complaints to surface. Stories from people who'd been humiliated, bullied, and treated unfairly. The courtroom became the stage where justice was finally served, and the town saw firsthand what accountability looked like. Standing outside the station, watching the community come together, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was exactly why I'd taken the job. Change was happening, and I was here to make sure it lasted. The town now knew that respect and justice were no longer just words, they were actions, and I'd be there to ensure those actions stayed true.